This week's episode was brought to you by J.L. Von Mycroft, Nick Gilbert, Bradley Peters, and Reese Robertson. Thank you, J.L. Von Mycroft, Nick Gilbert, Bradley Peters, and Reese Robertson. It's with the generous support of listeners just like you that keeps our subterranean bratwurst cookout hidden from the Earth-penetrating rabbit detection radar being beamed at us from a sentient spy satellite in geosynchronous orbit using a decentralized mesh network of mycelial filaments that conjure ghosts if you think about them too hard. If you'd like to help us keep our spy satellite cloaking fungus in functional condition, or just hear the second half of this episode, then please visit www.patreon.com/thewholerabbit, where your monthly donation of just $5 will not only get you instantaneous access to this extended episode, but every single one of our extended episodes, which may be one of the largest and most complete archives of bizarre, otherworldly shit on the internet, specifically tailored for those who were passionately seeking truth, or just like starting trouble. But that's not all. I'll send you a 5x5 high-quality vinyl sticker of our Big Bunny Baphomet cover art, which is guaranteed to get you in trouble if you stick it somewhere random in the workplace. You'll even get keys to our private Discord server where you could chat with listeners and even hosts of the show. Meaning it'll only cost you $5 to tell us exactly how wrong we are. It's a good time. If you enjoy listening to The Whole Rabbit, please consider giving us a like, subscribe, or share on your social media platform of choice. Heck, if you really want to help us out, tell at least one friend or family member you know enjoys mixed nuts, because that's what we are. Nuts! Nuts about the truth! Seriously though, if you don't have a tinfoil hat available, we suggest maybe skipping this episode. We'll have Tim Hacker to give us a palate cleanser next week, returning to our normal high strangeness programming. If you're easily offended, or just love Dick Cheney, I'm going to have to apologize to you ahead of time. For the rest of you, we suggest having a therapy kangaroo or a fidget spinner available if things get tumultuous. In this week's episode, we go all in on the biggest, most controversial, and deeply conspiratorial rabbit holes in the whole universe. The 2001 September 11th terrorist attacks, which ended the lives of over 3,000 people and ushered in an era of preemptive warfare without conditions of victory, the global surveillance state, and the legalization of rendition and torture, which looms large like a cloud over the national spirit to this very day. In the free show, we get our hands dirty with facts gathered during the last breaths of real journalism, deep cuts of occult symbolism, and cross-examine them with the official story to discover where in the details the devil is hiding. In the extended show, which is very extended, we go into the mind-melting, semi-accidental confession of Larry Silverstein about the collapse of Building 7. You know about the Solomon Brothers building, don't you? The Cheyney-Halliburton grift, numerous examples of hyperstition, 9/11 gematria, the suspicious art students, some of the more outlandish theories, and an eye-wateringly straightforward breakdown of the 9/11 attacks as told by the late Temple of Set founder, Michael Aquino. Thank you, and enjoy the show.
Crack open my beer.
Let's roll. So Donald Rumsfeld is giving the president his daily briefing. He concludes by saying, "Yesterday, 3 Brazilian soldiers were killed." "Oh no!" President Bush exclaims. "That's terrible." His staff sits stunned at this display of emotion, nervously watching the president sits, head in hands. Finally, the president looks up and asks, "How many is a Brazilian?"
Oh, Jesus.
When does a pentagon have 4 sides?
When?
When it intersects a plane?
Oh, that's bad.
During the election, Dick Cheney warned us that if John Kerry were to win, there'd be another terrorist attack. Turns out, when Bush won, he called it off.
I'll be honest, I don't get it.
Well, I guess by the end of this episode, you will. Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Whole Rabbit, where we're not just old enough to be personally traumatized by the terrorist attacks of September 11th, 2001, and being made to watch in helpless horror as the United States slid inexorably into a post-truth darkness we collectively wallow in today, where truth is cheap, principles are puddle deep, and hype is manufactured by foreign labs next to the supply of fentanyl? Nay. We put a lid on it long enough to simmer under the soul-crushing heat of political and intellectual alienation for 23 years, until it was reduced to a hard, crystalline coating on the bottom of the pan, which we scraped off, pulverized, and carefully poured into shiny black little pills for you all to enjoy, because this week, we're discussing 9/11 and how the devil pulled it off. I'm your host, Hack Rabbit, also known as Luke Madrid. I'm joined this week by my co-hosts, the dapper Doomsday Rescue Doggy, Mari-sama.
Putting on the Ritz.
The international art dealer, Malachor 5.
And I'm recording from the air ducts in your building with my Tamagotchi. Hola.
It's probably cooler in there. And the high priestess in the helicopter, Heka Astra.
Hello.
Disclaimer! If you enjoy having friends or dislike the idea of getting side glances in public, then please listen to this episode alone in the privacy of your car, basement, ritual chamber, or torture dungeon.
Or your mom's room.
Or just use headphones.
You've been warned.
Right, because some of the information we're going to talk about today in this episode is not 100% confirmed by your fact checkers online. We hosts will be sharing our own thoughts, our ideas, and project them on to some of these theories as well to go the extra step and give you the whole rabbit treatment on this topic. So just keep an open mind. I'd suggest this episode is also not blaming any race, language group, or country as being the mastermind behind this dark day in American history. We do not wish to disrespect any of the people who lost their lives that day. So I think officially our statement is the people responsible for it are the ones that the official story is going by, right?
Well, I wouldn't go that far. In fact, I was shocked at how much information we are presenting today that is confirmed, or at least presented that way in the mainstream media. You know what I mean?
Totally.
I think we go out on a limb a lot less than I thought we would on this episode. A lot of what we have to present is backed up by fact. That being said, for some people, even questioning the mainstream narrative about 9/11 is deeply offensive and a hard nope. There are certainly going to be listeners who have lost friends or family in these attacks, or know someone who did. And even for those who did not, 9/11 was the moment everything changed.
Yeah, I actually know one person who was a former Navy corpsman, and he was there at Ground Zero digging, searching for survivors. It's a customer of mine named Robert. Nice guy. But yeah, everything did change after this. If you're old enough, you know what we're talking about. The world was big time different before 9/11 ever happened. It was such a massive shift in global consciousness. It's very clear we'll never return to how it was before that day. Very similar to how the COVID lockdowns feel now.
It's almost hard to put into words how different the world seemed before 9/11. Looking back at footage from before this time, before people had smartphones or streaming devices or social media.
And one of the things that I've used on the Google is to pull up maps.
It now looks like a bygone era. At some point, the police stopped wearing blue and they switched to black. Good guys started torturing bad guys in movies and on TV. Kids stopped trick-or-treating. And for many, it felt like 9/11 is when we lost our innocence as a nation. And maybe it only looked like a coming out party for corruption because the naivety bubble finally burst. Like any time before 9/11 is like nostalgia retro wave, almost as if it's from another timeline, another place, another world. When the land was green and good.
Even though I was a kid, things just so happened to change around 2000. And even though I'm born in 1992, the years leading up to 2000, they were saying we're going to have flying cars. Like, people were still saying that and believing it. I don't know how much you guys remember, but like it was weird things like that. But after 9/11, it was just like, no, all that bright future stuff is gone.
Gone.
We're going to war. We're going to war. Praise Jesus. We're going to war.
Yeah, in the 90s is like, we're going to have flying cars. We're going to have computers that'll run everything, and we'll get to live in our own digital landscape in our world. And then after 9/11, it was like, get in the box! Get in the box! Shut up!
Yeah. Well, that was over quick. That's kind of what I was thinking. And also, we come into this traumatic event, like right after Y2K, while everyone was like hyped up and extremely paranoid, and some people were thinking the world was going to end. And so this was, I think that compounded on top of the energy of like right after 9/11, everyone was like, well, nice knowing you. Like the world is pretty much over as we know it.
You know, in a weird way, I almost feel like we were primed for it. Like the 90s were so fun that we were looking for something to be that upset about. You remember the Titanic? There was a moment of silence at the Academy Awards.
Yeah, everyone was crazy for that. And it like didn't even happen while anyone was alive. except for maybe like the silent generation.
The funny thing about the Titanic, well, it's not really funny, but interesting thing, is that there is a conspiracy theory about that too.
Yeah.
And it involves like the Rockefellers, if I remember correctly. It's
And
worthy of its own episode.
And insurance fraud.
Yeah.
For the United States, 9/11 was the black swan moment by which all others are judged, often compared to Pearl Harbor in severity and scope. These, however, were not military targets, but civilian targets. And this was not an act of war, but as it would be repeated so often afterwards, a cowardly act of terrorism. On that sunny Tuesday morning in September 2001, 19 men passed airport security and, armed with nothing but box cutters, hijacked 4 different commercial airliners, avoiding detection by the military and crashing said airliners into 3 separate targets, with one attempt supposedly foiled by the passengers on board. All told, in excess of 3,000 people lost their lives that morning, including scores of first responders in New York who willingly gave their lives for a chance to save others. Of those who would survive the fire and flames that Tuesday morning, an even greater number would lose their lives in the months and years following the eldritch horror that was the toxic dust cloud which smothered Manhattan for weeks following the collapse of World Trade Center's Tower 1, 2, and 7. Thicker still was the paranoia, after all. Besides being attacked on their own soil, a particularly unprecedented occurrence for Americans, these 3 Manhattan towers were the first, and to this day, the last, reinforced steel buildings to collapse due to structure fires, one of which wasn't even hit by a plane. Stranger still, when each tower eventually does collapse, it does so neatly into its own footprint at nearly free-fall speeds. The result was a pyroclastic flow of 500 tons worth of pulverized glass, asbestos, cement, and heavy metals, which the EPA and White House both failed to acknowledge as a serious threat until, for many, it was too late. Lesser known is the 3rd plane which hit the Pentagon, and the 4th, which, failing to arrive at a target, crashed unceremoniously into a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, leaving naught but a smoldering crater. Worse, though, was the smoldering crater left in the chest of Americans where their heart used to be. In response to the unprecedented levels of grief and trauma, the Bush administration leveraged the event to restructure both the government and U.S. foreign policy, which allowed for the warrantless wiretapping of Americans domestically, the creation of a no-fly list, invasive, time-consuming security measures at airports, the militarization of the police, the creation of Immigration's Customs Enforcement, the Department of Homeland Security, the TSA, Transportation Security Commission, and the rise of the surveillance state. For younger listeners, can you even imagine the United States without these things? Is it even the same United States? You wouldn't even recognize it. So for the first time, NATO invoked Article 5, which treats the attack on one member as an attack on all members, leading to international involvement in Afghanistan. Also for the first time, the United States officially adopted a stance of preemptive attack, which the Bush administration then used under false pretenses to invade Iraq. And best of all, there began the widespread use of drones for targeted killings, blowing up weddings and birthday parties, and sometimes just driving around. If that were not enough, the Bush administration legalized the use of torture and rendition, making the United States the only first world nation to do so. After Joe Biden pulled the United States out of Afghanistan in 2021, stranding a number of government employees and civilians, the Taliban was firmly still in control of the country. In this way, the dust of 9/11 never really settled, and America grew into something meaner, darker, and less unified than it ever had been, setting the stage for the culture of paranoia, hate, and lawlessness that America seems to be terminally ill with today. Naturally, some of us still have questions 23 years later, and we have done, in this episode, our best to answer some of them. Included in our analysis is an overview of the numerology and otherwise occult forces which surround the September 11th attacks, leading us to believe it was, in fact, perhaps a giant ritual. In fact, some believe the day, September 11th, actually itself has some special significance.
So naturally for me, when I would start an episode about something that's named after the date, right, we call 9/11 9/11 for the simple reason that that's the number of the day. And
it's like its own brand. That date is now owned by Bush and Dick TM.
so I can't help but have my, red lights, my alarms blow off whenever I find some new information that's like, oh, this happened on 9/11 some year in the past, though. And there's a long list that I have, but very few of them are, to me, relevant to this attack that's happening or a conspiracy theory, a psyop going on the whole time. So as an icebreaker, what if I told you that Christmas isn't Jesus' actual birthday?
Say what?
Yeah, there is some information I found online that people believe that he was born on 9/11. The year 3.
What? which is crazy
Oh.
because 2001 simplifies down to 3.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so this is just to get our brain squirming a little bit. In a wacky book titled The Star of Bethlehem, the star that astonished the world, the author, Ernest L. Martin, brings up a new theory for when exactly Jesus Christ was born, using various verses from the Bible and his own interpretation of astrology. And I haven't checked his work. I just read a couple of his paragraphs, so I don't know if he's actually right. But according to Martin, his calculations brought him to an exact date and time of the birth. And this kind of requires us readers to accept a few premises, first of all.
All right, break it down, Malcor. How does this work?
So the book of Revelation, symbolism, is based on astrology. So whoever wrote the New Testament's last book knew astrology. That's one premise we have to accept. The second is that Martin is correct in his interpretation of these celestial events, or when things aligned in the sky. And I guess you also have to accept that astrology is significant information to have in the first place, right? Some people call astrology bullshit. I can't prove them wrong, so you have to accept that too.
Well, how did they find Jesus? The 3 wise men, huh? They were looking at the stars, checking their horoscopes.
They were astrologers. Yeah, one second. I need some beer.
And some M&Ms.
So this is what Martin has to say in regards to Revelations 12, 1 through 6. He says, "This clothing of the woman by the sun occurs for a 20-day period each year. This 20-degree spread could indicate the general time when Jesus was born. In 3 BCE, the sun would have entered this celestial region about August 27th and exited from it about September 15th. If John in the book of Revelation is associating the birth of Jesus with the period when the sun was mid-bodied to this woman called Virgo, and this is no doubt what he means, then Jesus would have to be born within that 20-day period. From the point of view of the Magi, who were astrologers, this would have been the only logical sign under which the Jewish Messiah might be born, especially if he was to be born of a virgin. The position of the moon in John's vision actually pinpoints the nativity to within a day, even to within a period of an hour and a half, within 90 minutes. On that day, 9/11. This may appear an absurd assessment on the surface, but it's quite possible.
Whoa.
So Martin is assuming that Revelation 12 is using the astrological associations for the sun, moon, the stars, and the woman that is Virgo. Here, Mary would be the constellation Virgo. She is a virgin mother after all. The clothing mentioned here is that of nearby stars, which we are assuming are the clothes, and using these stars as, location points for the Star of Bethlehem. So around this star is other stars, right? The clothing of the woman. Revelation 12 states that the moon is at the woman's feet.
Mother Mary's often portrayed this way.
Yes, because of Revelation 12.
Crazy.
So Martin calculates that this happened on 9/11/3 CE. Furthermore, Martin points out that this is a possibility because Jupiter and Regulus might have had a conjunction at this moment too.
So that would have been like the star that the wise men saw.
Yes, the brightest thing in the sky would be Jupiter and Regulus conjunct.
That conjunction is kind of like a symbol for the King of Kings as well, which is what the wise men were looking for.
And lastly, Martin claims that in 3 CE, Tishri 1, the first month in the Hebrew calendar, started on 9/11, which would be a perfect day for a Messiah to be born, of course. And from what I can find, Tishri 1, the day of the first day of the new year in the Hebrew calendar, is observed on the 15th. But, he's talking about 3 CE, so maybe things were a little different back then, or it's hard to actually determine.
Well,
But
still really interesting. Like, even if we throw out the Tishri thing, if Jesus was born on 9/11, as Mari noticed about what you were saying, Jupiter and Regulus having a conjunction has an essence of kingship. And what did we see after 9/11 was a consolidation of power in the executive branch of the U.S. government. Now, this one's kind of conspiratorial, but it deep cuts because it's based on insider knowledge that I have. I don't know if it's true, but I was told that, how we talked about the world teacher thing and the Brotherhood of Saturn from the turn of the century. Now, from what I understand, because we're still living in the age of Aquarius versus Leo on the other side, those energies are going to repeat. And before 9/11, it almost felt like, and we talk about this with propaganda in all the movies at the time, that America was kind of moving away from Christianity and more towards Buddhism, right? And the elites were kind of nudging it in that direction for a long time. But from what I understand, when 9/11 happened, boom, overnight, it's done. And America moved very radically back to like a more evangelical Christian direction. And so, if there are factions of elites wrestling for the zeitgeist, perhaps they used the true birthday of Jesus Christ to move the timeline back over to where they wanted it to be. We're getting pretty far with the speculating, but it does dovetail with some of what I've heard.
Right. So that's one of many quote unquote 9/11s of the past that I wanted to talk about. And that's the only one I'm going to talk about in length. So skipping a ton of them, right? Moving to much more contemporary events that did happen on 9/11 that I feel are relevant. In 1974, New York, device, it goes off. If you know what I mean. And it killed an officer that was trying to defuse it. This was going down in Grand Central Terminal, which is
Whoa.
pretty big deal. In 1981, on 9/11, Dylan Klebold, one of the Columbine shooters, was born.
Whoa.
Right? Of course, after Columbine, America changed forever.
Huge black swan moment.
In 1990, Boeing 727 disappears over the Atlantic Ocean, traveling from Malta to Peru. In 1991, Continental Express Flight 2574 crashes in Colorado County, Texas.
So there's some airline disaster stuff on that date.
Yeah, and big black swan moments for America as well that completely shift the zeitgeist into the darkest of directions.
9 and 11 are also just powerful numbers in and of themselves, especially in occult practice. Anything multiplied by 9 can be simplified back down to 9 when finding its, quote, digital root, or basically adding every digit together until it's a single digit again. The opposite happens when you add 9 to any number. Instead, the number will always simplify down to what it would have been had you never added 9. In such a case, it refuses to influence the digital root. In relation to this quality, 9 is also associated with sex, multiplication, and algorithmic, or basically automatic, consciousness. These ideas seem to be a bit abstract or hard to connect until we look at the Kabbalistic tree of life, where the ninth sphere of Yesod, which means foundation, is often explained as a miniature or microcosm of what will become manifest in the real world or earth, the macrocosm. What happens here on the small scale automatically becomes at the larger scale. That's the general idea.
So Malkuth is in Kether as Kether is in Malkuth, as above, so below, right?
Essentially, and it's Yesod that has the tiny model that gets printed into the full-scale thing down in Malkuth.
Right. And the number 9 is often understood as the true final number, right? Because 10 is just a repetition of 1.
Yes.
Sounds a little cryptic, but it's true.
It's like the last single digit.
Yes.
And then over here we got 11. Now 11 is a number of union and is, like 9, also associated with multiplication and sex in this way. 11 is also a number of supreme importance in Aleister Crowley's religion of Thelema, where it is often said to be symbolic of the magic 11-lettered phrase, abrahadabra. Just looking at the wiki for this concept gives us a great synopsis. We've talked about it before on the show.
Right. Abrahadabra having 5 vowels, all of them A, and 6 consonants in it, 5 and 6, add them together, you get 11. It's a beautiful relationship thing. It is sex magic, and that's why 5 and 6 is Nuit's number. It's about this weird union operation going on. It's very occult.
Now, Wikipedia boils these ideas down really well, saying Abrahadabra is also referred to as the word of double power. It reflects the integration of various esoteric principles, such as the union of the 5-fold pentagram, the microcosm, and the 6-fold hexagram, the macrocosm, resulting in the complete manifestation of the rosy cross, which is Jesus. It's Jesus' birthday! I can't unsee it now. In his commentaries, Crowley says the word is a symbol of, quote, the establishment of the pillar or phallus of the macrocosm in the void of the microcosm, which sounds like an extremely cryptic and sort of pornographic way of saying it makes the big reflect the small and the small reflect the big.
But it's also talking about like a pillar, like a tower.
That it is.
The number 11 is literally 2 towers. Like, hard to run away from these points.
So in short, the numbers 9 and 11, when paired together, strongly symbolize the union of the macrocosm and the microcosm. The Hermetic maxim, as above, so below. Or, what I do on the small scale becomes true at the large scale and vice versa. It's basically a supercharge on anything you're attempting to create or manifest. It's like gasoline for whatever fire you're choosing to start that day. We will discuss more about the occult currents of 9/11 later.
I just thought it was interesting that if you do a quick search for words and phrases with the Hebrew gematria value of 911, you get division. You also get global currency. And then the two most interesting to me was jihadists and Al-Qaeda terrorist attack. All of those
What?
equal 911.
Oh,
Yeah.
I just looked it up. In Greek, 9/11 is omphalos, like the center of the world, World Trade Center. It's kind of, whoa.
Yeah, World Center. Man, when it was 9/11, it was the first day of third grade for me. I took the school bus to elementary school, all of the, 6 years, kindergarten to fifth grade. I had my best friend, Richard. We had just come back from summer vacation and we didn't have internet like we do today. So I hadn't seen this kid in like months, right? And my first interaction is him like running out of his mom's Honda Accord, throwing his backpack on over his, shoulder, getting his arms through the loops, and he's like screaming at me like that dude in Starship Troopers, "We're going to war! We got bombed!" And I'm like, "What the are you talking about?" And we get on the school bus, and he's my buddy, so we're sitting next to each other. He's like, "Yeah, they bombed in New York, a building's blowing up," and like all this stuff. It's interesting that my first news of it was my kid friend who's got like some information, right? He knows a building's burning. He's saying it's a bomb. But like modern conspiracies are like telling me it was bombs. So it's like, Richard, if you
Fucking
listen
smart
to this,
kid.
oh, he actually is really smart. He went to a magnet school too. He didn't even go to the same ghetto school I went to. Oh man, Richard, you were right. Yeah, we got to school and it was just weird. It was my third grade, so I kind of knew what to do first day, but everybody just kind of got in lines and got their papers already and like, boom, straight to class. And then my real teacher wasn't even there, Mr. Carrillo. We had a substitute teacher that day, Mr. Douglas, and he drew it on the whiteboard. 2 towers, planes hit, and one of them just fell. And then while we were in class, the other one fell, and we were watching it on TV. And then like the rest of the day was a little bit of a blur, but I do remember that much.
It's just draw little curly cues of smoke coming out of the two big rectangles.
Kind of. And we did end up going to war.
I actually had a weird premonition or something that like something was going to happen the evening of September 10th. I remember trancing out around sunset and listening to Marilyn Manson's Coma Black. And in my mind's eye, I saw fireballs raining from the sky. I would go into moods like this though when I was a teenager and do art and write poetry and stuff like that. But this particular bout was really intense and foreboding. There was like this distinct sense of mourning some future event. And the following day on my way to school, the morning radio was talking excitedly about how the Pentagon had been bombed. My first period class was a news broadcast course, so it was only natural we'd flip on the TV and watch the coverage as it unfolded. I remember the days that followed though, in that same first period class, one of the seniors, a girl, she said that we were going to bomb Afghanistan over what had happened because they were harboring terrorists. And the teacher blew up at her. He was like, "Oh, what? We're going to bomb Chicago if we find terrorists there too? Like that makes any sense? You have no idea what you're talking about." And I'm grateful this is a core memory of mine because it shows just how quickly they spun a narrative around this event. We were being primed for invasion well before the clouds cleared and before the shock had worn off and we were able to, even think about the details. Like we were ready. So let's go bomb Afghanistan.
Oh yeah, they wouldn't shut up about terrorists.
Our enemies are innovative and resourceful, and so are we. They never stop thinking about new ways to harm our country and our people, and neither do we.
I came up with a joke that year because George W. Bush wouldn't quit talking about getting those terrorists. I drew a picture of him having dinner on a patio set on top of a terrorist, like a rug. And he's saying, "Oh, I'm having dinner on the terrorists." I thought that was so funny because I was in high school when this happened. This was I was a freshman. And I believe it was my first period algebra class. We had only been there for maybe like 15 or 20 minutes. And then the principal came on the loudspeaker and made an announcement that the World Trade Center had been hit by an airplane. And he instructed all the teachers to basically stop their lesson and go ahead and turn on the TV. So we were watching the coverage. We saw the second tower fall in that class. Later on, the principal came back on and announced that the Pentagon got hit. So at that point, the classroom was all abuzz. I mean, people really didn't know what to think. And then after the Pentagon got hit, people started spinning up, what do you think happened? It was a bomb. It had to be something or rather. Like people couldn't believe it was airplanes hitting stuff. I remember that. Yeah, that was a day. I think they let us off halfway throughout the day because we didn't know. I lived in an area that has a really high status military base and research arsenal. So we're actually on one of the military target maps. So they kind of sent everyone home because they were worried that something would happen here, but it never did. Man, my whole high school experience was completely changed by that event for sure.
I mean, we didn't have in Canada the same kind of grievous distress or trauma from the event that a lot of Americans felt, but we definitely still shut everything down. I remember I was in grade 10 9/11, and I was in school at the time. I guess by the time that it became news, they sent everybody home after we watched the news. So, but it did affect everything that, like airport security in Canada as well, like all that kinds of stuff. But I don't think we had the same kind of distress and trauma from it that guys felt in the US. There's kind of a disconnect. Like, oh, well, that only happened in the US. That's not going to happen here, I think was a general consensus. I do identify more as an American now than a Canadian, and I do find the event itself to be horrific.
There definitely was a before 9/11 and after. And hot dogs just don't taste as good afterwards. I don't know what it is. Before 9/11, every Big Mac used to look just like the photograph. You'd always get the Lucky Scratcher. Gas was 2 cents a gallon.
The music on the radio was good.
It was actually pretty rad. So, to flash back to that fateful morning, prepared a bit of a timeline of everything that happened. Mostly so we can review and be ready to talk about each of the things that happened. And there's actually some new information that you might not know. So, 5:45 a.m., the hijackers began boarding the flights. So, pretty early in the morning. Now, after arriving at the Portland airport, the hijackers, Mohammed Atta, now he's the ringleader, and Abdulaziz Al-Amari, they check in for their flight in Portland, Maine. Now, Atta was apparently very upset that he had to go through security at Boston a second time after he caught his connecting flight.
You're gonna stop this clean right now!
Now, Boston is where both Flight 11 and Flight 175 will depart from on their terminal course for the Twin Towers. God, can you imagine on the day you are going to die, you have to catch a connecting flight? I'd be mad too. So, noting that their flight is due to leave soon, the ticket agent checks them in. His name is Michael Tahui. He says, "You're cutting it close." And Tahui, he's thinking that this pair seems a bit unusual. He notices they both have $2,500 first class one-way tickets. He later comments, "You don't see many of those." It's like all those inappropriate jokes about one-way tickets are like that. They actually did have those. Now, on their appearance, he said that Atta looked like a walking corpse. He looked so angry. In contrast to who he said, Al-Amari, well, he could barely speak English, and he had this like goofy smile, and he couldn't believe that Al-Amari knew he was going to die that day. He couldn't square it in his head. To who he would later recount, "I thought they looked like two Arab terrorists, but then I berated myself for the stereotype, and I did nothing." It's kind of messed up, like, oh, those guys look like Arab terrorists, and then what,
Well, that's politically incorrect to say, so I shouldn't alert the police. That would be a wrong thing to do.
Now, this is where it gets crazy. Now, it's 6 a.m., just 15 minutes later. I had never heard this before, but apparently a bunch of Middle Easterners showed up in a van outside of Colony Beach and Tennis Resort in Longboat Key, Florida. And they were claiming to be members of the press who had arrived to give President Bush a poolside interview. They named a Secret Service agent as one of their points of contact. And long story short, Bush had only checked into the hotel like 12 hours earlier. And the agent they asked for was like not on his detail at all. And also, the Secret Service agent that did reply said that no interview was scheduled. So the men were summarily kicked off the premises and told to contact White House staff. And this information comes to us from a local fire marshal, Carol Moonaghan, who heard it from the hotel staff, but it would like officially be denied. So can you imagine that? Like, that's what the news would have been had the plan gone through. Like, the president has been assassinated. Oh my God, the towers. Oh my God, the Pentagon. Oh my God, the Senate building. Like, it just, like, had the attacks gone perfectly successfully, it would have been even crazier. But by the end of this episode, you'll see why having Bush disappear would have been, like, really ideal. Now, at 6:45 a.m. at the Boston airport, Atta took a call from Flight 175 hijacker Marwan Al-Sehi. And this call was apparently to confirm that the attacks were still ready to begin. Is it fucking on, bro? It's fucking on, bro. They're probably seeing if it was still on because they didn't get Bush, They were like watching the TV, like, oh. Now then, it's at 8 o'clock, the American Airlines Flight 11, a Boeing 767 with 92 people on board, departs from Boston's Logan International Airport. It's bound all the way for Los Angeles, so it's got a full tank of fuel. Then just 15 minutes later, 8:14 a.m., United Airlines Flight 175, another Boeing 767 with 65 people aboard, also departs from Logan Airport headed to Los Angeles. So another airplane totally full of fuel. It's around this time that the last routine communication with Flight 11 is made. So like everything's going fine. Now, just 5 minutes later, American Airlines Flight 77, a Boeing 757 with 64 people aboard, takes off from Washington Dulles International Airport for Los Angeles. So big aircrafts, they're full of fuel, and if you notice, all of these aircrafts have very few people on board. They're like minimal amount of people on. Now, 8:21, Flight 11's transponder is turned off. Then at 8:23, the American Airlines attempt to contact Flight 11's cockpit. And this is where it gets wacky, because hijacker Mohammed Atta, the regulator, he kind of mistakenly broadcasts over the air traffic control channel instead of the public address system indicating the hijacking. Like, he means to talk to the cabin, but he like accidentally radios back to the tower. And this is when a voice believed to be Atta's is heard by the air traffic controller saying,
"We have some planes. Stay quiet and you'll be okay. We're returning to the airport."
they were not returning to the airport. So at this point, the air traffic controllers hear this and they're like, I think that airplane's been hijacked.
Also, turning your transponder off during a flight is actually illegal. You can get in huge trouble for it. And a transponder is just a thing that pings and shows the location of the airplane while it's flying for traffic controllers.
It looks like they spent about 10 minutes like puckering their butthole trying to figure out what to do, because it took them about that long, 10, 13 minutes, to contact the U.S. Air Force's Northeast Air Defense Sector, or NEADS as it's known. We'll talk about why their response was so slow. Now then, the last flight of the bunch, Flight 93, with only 44 people on board, takes off from Newark International Airport after a delay, headed to San Francisco. Just a few minutes later, it's at 8:46 a.m. that Flight 11 crashes into floors 93 through 99 of the North Tower of the World Trade Center in New York, killing everybody on board. Hundreds more inside the North Tower killed instantly. Well, damage that Atta had done to the building, it severed all escape routes from floor 92 and above, trapping more than 800 survivors, and pretty much just left them to burn to death. Nobody above the 91st floor really made it out alive, is what they think. I remember hearing one story that there was one company that lost 600 employees like instantly the second the airplane hit. Now, it's over 15 minutes later, at 9:02 a.m., that evacuation orders are broadcast to the World Trade Center's South Tower. Now, prior to this, the stories that I heard is that people were told to stay in their offices and let emergency personnel deal with the North Tower. One lady recounts that security blocked her exit from the building. Like, she went down to the lobby and they had these big security guards like, no, don't go outside. You gotta let these people do their job. Everything's fine. Like, it was an accident. Like, something, you know what I mean? Like, just get back to work. Get back to work!
That's crazy too. Like, oh, my job is to make sure these people just stay here at work. It's like, dude, somebody just crashed a fucking plane into our neighbor. Like, let's get the out of here.
I think they were trying to eliminate like casualties due to stampeding and people like fleeing with terror, I guess, because you can have a lot of accidents happen that way too. So
what the you're just in the same situation they are in. Why aren't you freaking out, homeboy?
To prevent pandemonium, I guess. But
at that point, what are you gonna do when it?
Yeah, I'd rather tumble down some stairs and get stepped on a bit than stay in the tower.
No matter how you cut it, I'm not that guy.
Some New Yorkers work really hard. I heard stories of, like, for instance, one lady was, as the building is burning, they're trying to drag her away from her desk, and she's like still trying to like take calls to schedule like her boss's meetings and like personal stuff. You know what I mean? Like Betty the assistant. It doesn't matter if planes are crashing into the building. She's got appointments. And like New Yorkers are also kind of tough. It's like, oh man, something blew up. That sucks. I gotta get back to work. Or they're like checking it out. But then it totally changes though at 9:03 when Flight 175 crashes into floor 77 through 85 of the South Tower of the World Trade Center, Building 2. Now at this point, now people are scared. They're like, oh, that's not an accident. That's a f***ing terrorist attack. We are under attack. I have no idea what's going on. Anything could happen. Oh my God. Oh my God. This is just like chaos for 20 minutes. At 9:24, the FAA notifies NEADS about the suspected hijacking of Flight 77. And then at 9:37, Flight 77 crashes into the Pentagon in Arlington, Virginia. Or it's like right outside Washington, D.C. This is when U.S. airspace is shut down. Well, 10 minutes after the airplane hits the Pentagon. Then 15 minutes later, 9:59 a.m., the South Tower of the World Trade Center collapses. This is like only 53 minutes after it was struck. And then while that's going on, the dust cloud is spreading. At 10:03 a.m., Flight 93 crashes into a field in Somerset County, Pennsylvania, after passengers attempt to retake the plane. Then at 10:28 a.m., just 29 minutes after the South Tower, the North Tower, the first one hit of the World Trade Center, collapses. At this point, everybody is like, where's the president? Where's Rumsfeld? And they don't show up until later that evening. It's just good old Mr. Dick Cheney Cheyney running the show, but we're getting there.
So just to be a little bit more clear here, the first tower's hit, doesn't fall. Second tower is hit, it falls, and then the first tower that was hit falls.
Yes.
The time frame of this is within 2 hours.
Yeah, the Pentagon's getting hit, and there's another airplane that's either shot down. We find out later, though, it's actually the passengers crashed it in this act of heroism.
I mean, just put that into consideration to the official story about melting steel beams.
Well, let's get into that, shall we?
This is pretty fast. It's pretty quick for jet fuel to get something this massive that hot. It's hard to convince me that within an hour the tower falls.
Well, hold your horses, Malachor. Thankfully, we have the National Institutes for Standards and Technology to give us the answers of how both towers collapse into their own footprint at free fall speeds.
Do tell.
Would you like to know, Mr. Contrarian non-joiner, Malachor 5?
This is the free section, so yes.
Because the government has done its thinking for us, you see, and that's why we should listen and never question the government, ever.
The experts.
Never question the experts, because responsibility is dangerous.
We're trying to stop that from happening.
It's our responsibility as rulers.
Now, according to the NIST report, the trade towers, both of them, they collapsed due to a weakening of the outer support beams caused by burning jet fuel and the resultant office fires. According to the NIST report, the floors, they began to sag and bend under the enormous heat, okay, like boobies. And this caused the outer support beams, those are like the bra straps, right? They bowed inward, right? The inner support beams. So it's like big, heavy floors are like pulling the outer support beams inward, and eventually it snaps. And it causes each floor to fall onto each other like a stack of super duper heavy pancakes, pulverizing material under the immense weight as it falls at nearly free fall speeds. This collapse sent debris flying in every direction, wedging itself in various buildings along the way, some of which would fall into the World Trade Center 7 building, which is a bit shorter than the other two. And speaking of which, it's at 5:20 p.m., nearly 7 hours later, that Building 7 of the World Trade Center, it's 47 stories tall, it collapses due to fires and damage caused from debris from the collapse of Towers 1 and 2. So it caught on fire, and it also collapsed down into its own footprint at free fall speeds. And by that evening, President George Bush addresses the nation, vowing to hunt down and punish those responsible. The hunter must hunt. And he actually climbed into his jet plane at that moment, his jet fighter, and he personally surveyed the land of America from the sky.
I'm pretty sure Tom Cruise was his co-pilot.
Yes.
America, yeah.
And so, in my State of the Union, or my speech to the nation, whatever you want to call it, speech to the nation.
Dick Cheney put on his wizard hat, had like his little trained eagle land on his arm, and like sent him out to go look for the terrorists, pluck out their eyes.
You know, because of 9/11, this is why Call of Duty took over every young man from 2001 to 2011 or so.
Dude, I'm convinced that was the military using video games as like covert training.
Oh, totally.
To like train up the youth of America to join the military and fight the war.
That's the only reason why Call of Duty was the #1 selling game for so long. It's because of 9/11.
I think they got subsidized by the government, literally.
They did.
Wow.
So that's the official story. Now, starting from the official story and kind of working our way back here, we're trying to answer who's the devil and how did they pull off 9/11? Well, the answer we're given is the ringleader was a guy named Muhammad Atta. Now, according to CNN, Army Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Schaefer went public with a claim that a military intelligence project from the year 2000 named Able Danger, it identified 9/11 terrorist ringleader Muhammad Atta and 3 other hijackers as possible Al-Qaeda members. So they were already on the radar, basically. Now, beginning in September of 2000, a year before the attacks, Schaefer claims to have begun trying to meet with the FBI about these 4 potential terrorists, but each time he found that the meeting had been canceled by military lawyers, almost as if they were protected. Now, after the attacks, Colonel Schaefer met with the 9/11 Commission in Afghanistan, because he was probably fighting, to give information about what was known of Atta prior to the attacks, but to his surprise, none of this information that he gave actually found its way into the 9/11 Commission report. So they left that out. Even more damning, officials had a hell of a time answering for this one later. Besides being actively involved in watching Mohammed Atta received $100,000 from a Pakistani intelligence director, Lieutenant General Mahmoud Ahmed, just prior to carrying out the attacks. And then, just a week before the attacks, the same Mahmoud Ahmed would meet with CIA Director George Tenet in Langley, Virginia. Okay. And then later, when Tenet first heard about the attacks, he remarked, "Boy, I hope it wasn't those guys in flight schools in the Midwest."
Oh, gosh.
Oh, I hope it wasn't them boys that we was watching to be terrorists that was gonna fly airplanes into buildings in New York. I guess that was them. Oops. I guess we dropped the ball on that one. I just think it's crazy. You got Pakistani spies sending this guy $100,000 and that same spies meeting with the CIA director. What?
In the show notes, I have a gallery of these weird posters and media things that are about airlines or New York in general. And one of them is a Pakistani International Airlines poster with the silhouette of an airplane, a commercial airplane, over the Twin Towers.
It looks like it's going to fly into it. It's so inappropriate.
I saw that, and it's from 1997. It's an advertisement for their airlines.
It's funny because it looked inappropriate even before 9/11, which is what I love about it.
There's a cool gallery of images in the notes if you have access.
I'll say it now, and I'll say it again later. If you look real hard, and a lot of it's been scrubbed off of YouTube, but if you look, you can find it. Check the sources in the notes, especially if you're one of our Patreons, because I don't always have space for all the sources on the free side of the show. So pay me $5 to get the sources. Long story short, there's 60 examples of 9/11 happening in the media or something similar to it before the actual 9/11 attacks. And at some point, you just have to take off your glasses and be like, how did that happen? Why is there so much of it? I don't even... We'll get to it, though. So anyway, you got Pakistan sending the lead hijacker money, and the CIA director's meeting with this Pakistani guy, and they're watching the terrorists way ahead of time. But it doesn't stop there. It makes sense that the CIA director had heard of Atta and his friends. After all, some of them had been in the United States off and on for some time, including Flight 77 hijacker pilot Hani Hanjour, who had been learning English in Arizona since 1991 and taking flight school since the fall of 1996 at CRM Airline Training Center in Scottsdale, where he was described by instructor Duncan Hasty as a weak student who was wasting our resources. Despite this, Hani Hanjour is issued a pilot's license anyway, and according to the Washington Post, the FAA refuses to discuss the details of how exactly this happened. Then, according to the New York Times, in the year 2000, Hanjour decides to brush up on his skills training on a Boeing 737 simulator at Pan Am International Flight Academy in Mesa, Arizona, where his instructors remarked, his piloting skills were so shoddy, his grasp of English so inadequate, and they questioned whether his pilot's license was genuine. Then later, in 2001, just a month before the attack, Hanjour signed up for the Sawyer School of Aviation, where Wes Fultz said of him, he had only the barest understanding of what the instruments were there to do.
Dang, this guy sucked.
This guy went to so many different flight schools, and he applied for the Pakistani Airlines, or was it Saudi Arabian Airlines? You can find it all on his wiki. But basically, time and time again, he's told that he has no capacity to be a pilot. And he sucks every time he does any of these courses.
Yeah, because the media went and asked the pilot trainers, so you trained the 9/11 hijackers and you taught them how to fly? And they're like, oh, wait a minute, that's being generous. That guy was an idiot. He definitely could not fly. You know what I mean?
I tried to teach him, but it didn't stick at all.
Yeah, I tried to show him.
He failed over and over again, or he would drop out over and over again.
And then magically one day, he had a pilot's license.
And nobody's exactly sure how that happened, really. And if they do, they're not telling us. Now, what makes all this information remarkable is because this hijacker, Hani Hanjour, was said to have pulled off an advanced maneuver over DC, doing a sort of corkscrew, while drastically decreasing altitude to 30 feet above the ground, low enough to knock down a series of light poles, and fly directly into the west side of the Pentagon, leaving almost nothing behind but a giant gaping hole that smoldered for hours. All 59 passengers were killed instantly, alongside 125 people working in the Pentagon at the time. The damage would have been worse, they say, but the Pentagon had just finished renovating and reinforcing its west wing, which was still sparsely populated by employees.
Huh.
Mostly budget people, you know? So we at the Whole Rabbit are not the first people to notice this apparent discrepancy between the pilot's widely reported lack of skill and pulling off a maneuver that skilled airline pilots have proven difficult to recreate in flight simulators without crashing over and over and over again. But wait, there's more. A number of the other hijackers have strange connections as well. According to the New York Post and Newsweek, as late as 2019, they reported that Ahmed Al-Nami, Ahmed Al-Ghamdi, and Saeed Al-Ghamdi all had their addresses listed on their driver's license and car registration as the Naval Air Station in Pensacola, leading some to believe they had received training there. Oh boy. I feel like by now, some of you should see why some people had their tinfoil hats permanently welded onto their head after 9/11. Like, this is why. This is what drove your goofy uncle crazy. Like, this is what did it.
I mean, there's some wacky fact that more often than not, you can take pretty much any situation and understand that there's, there's the truth that you're given, and then there's the other side of things, and somewhere in the middle, there's probably the actual truth. So, I mean, it makes sense to me why some people go like full-fledged in either direction, but I think somewhere in the middle, there's probably some truth.
Like, all I'm saying is cut that weirdo in your family some slack. They probably read something that blackpilled them for life, and if you're that person, don't let anybody else know. Keep it to yourself. Just hold it deep inside and let it turn into cancer. That's what you want to do.
What?
Don't listen to the Whole Rabbit on speakerphone.
Hold it inside.
Oh, man.
Don't let anyone see that your soul has been crushed by the truth, okay?
Just join the Whole Rabbit.
You can talk to us about it. That's fine.
I mean, there's a lot of this stuff I didn't know going into this episode. And then I was really surprised by some of this that, like, the more you look, the more you're like, wait, what?
I was a little intimidated because I was, like, returning to a subject that I felt very strongly about in the past. And I was like, am I going to be able to find evidence of all the weird stuff I remember? And I was like, oh, there's even more of it now. Like, it goes on and on.
It's so organized now.
Well, there's lots of other people that have gone sniffing around and found a lot of things are wrong. People care. So even if the FBI and CIA had not already been watching the hijackers, which they were, thankfully, their identification survived the crash and was found by a random pedestrian amongst the rubble somewhere on the streets of Manhattan. Some of it was slightly singed, but to read directly from the 9/11 Commission hearing, Miss Susan Ginsburg says,
beginning with passports. 4 of the hijackers' passports have survived in the whole or part. 2 were recovered from the crash site of United Airlines Flight 93 in Pennsylvania. These are the passports of Ziad Jarrah and Saeed Al-Ghamdi. 1 belonged to a hijacker on American Airlines Flight 11. This is the passport of Satam Al-Suqami. A passerby picked it up and gave it to an NYPD detective shortly before the World Trade Center towers collapsed.
oh my God.
A 4th passport was recovered from luggage that did not make it from a Portland flight to Boston on the connecting flight, which was American Airlines Flight 11. This is the passport of Abdul Aziz Al-Amari.
Wait just a fucking second. You're saying that somebody picked up the hijacker's passport off the ground before the towers collapsed, handed it to a fucking police officer before the towers collapsed.
Not to mention, but how a lot of the wreckage they claimed was pulverized by the impact. And so there was like nothing recognizable left over. The black boxes that are supposedly supposed to record like actual airline crashes for evidence-based reasons, they were never recovered or found and were assumed to be obliterated. Yet these little pieces of paper survived perfectly intact. Yeah,
both,
okay.
Both attacks. Both! We're supposed to actually believe that. That's what we are supposed to believe. Get f***ing real.
It doesn't make any sense. But then, like, that's also the same thing that they said at the other crash site, too. Like, they got all the passports back, or at least a good chunk of it, the big head honcho guys that were, the main people in those attacks, even from the Pentagon and from the Pennsylvania field crash. Like none of the plane basically survived, but paper passports did.
They didn't even
that doesn't make sense to me.
They didn't even find bodies or evidence of, like, death, but they found the pieces of paper. Like, what?
The Pennsylvania field one is the one that makes the least sense to me because it's like, it's this big smoldering hole. There's like no fucking airplane bit, no bodies, but there's passports.
Yeah, just sitting in there.
Sense.
It was at that point they realized they could just tell us anything, in my opinion.
And we just buy it. Yeah.
Anything. It doesn't matter how stupid it is. Like, we'll just go for it now.
As long as we're scared.
It's like we're afraid to point out the elephant in the room because it's going to knock down the building. Now, to make this all better, Muhammad Atta's checked baggage had been left behind at Portland Airport. It never made its way with him to Boston. Now, the backpack he had contained maps of major metropolitan areas, flight manuals, prayer books, plans regarding the hijacking, and, of course, his last will and testament. A strange thing to bring with you if you're planning to blow yourself up. Who's gonna read it?
Maybe he knew that his passport would survive, so surely his last will and testament would too.
Obviously. So, of course, these bizarre artifacts seem to make the entire thing an open and shut case. This made it a bit easier because Osama bin Laden, after all, wasn't raising his hand to take credit anytime soon. The Taliban even offered to extradite him to us if we could provide decent evidence of his involvement. Bush is like, but we got his passport.
So the Taliban straight up was like, whoa, that's crazy. If you can show us it's Osama bin Laden, you can have him.
Basically, which is kind of their way of saying, like, we don't believe you. And that's crazy because they would probably love to take credit for it. But they're like, no. Now, despite how strange these parts of the story may be, they're actually backed up by mainstream media and even government sources. I really didn't have to look that far to back this stuff up. All of this information together, it's led some to suspect there was more to 9/11 than we were collectively led to believe. Go figure. Now, if bin Laden and his inept band of flunkies were not behind 9/11, who was? If the devil was pulling the strings, whose scaly hand can we trace them back to? And if you're looking at the big picture, when things started to go downhill, this should give you some insight. Now, going back to the year 2000, it was an election year for the United States president, and it was a struggle of unprecedented proportions. One that was not settled democratically by the people, but by the Supreme Court. Long story short, on election night of November of 2000, the number of votes for Al Gore, the Democratic candidate, and George Bush, the Republican, they were too close to call, particularly in the swing state of Florida. The reason Florida was so important is because the United States does not technically elect its president through popular vote. Each state has what are called electors, and those electors exist in a quantity that corresponds to the number of senators and representatives. So some states have more electors than others because the number of representatives increase with the population. So more population, more electors, more votes for president. Ultimately, it is these electors that cast their vote and decide who the president is. These electors are merely pledged or promised to vote the way the population votes. It's almost ceremonial. This process makes it so winning most states is an all or nothing scenario, with the winner being awarded all of the electoral votes of that state. And this made it so, even though Al Gore had more popular votes, winning the election was whoever won Florida's 25 electoral votes. Basically, it was like whoever won Florida wins this goddamn election. And it was basically just too big of a mess for anyone to handle with any actual integrity or seriousness. And so the Supreme Court voted to halt the recount, and it essentially awarded the presidency to George Bush and the Republican Party. Some people were kind of mad. I was a little kid and I remember how mad people were. Now, meanwhile, the General Services Administration was refusing to provide government resources for the transition because the election had not yet actually been decided. So the Bush team had set up a privately funded transition office in Washington, D.C., which was being operated by none other than who but Dick Cheney. In this way, Dick Cheney was empowered to build the Bush administration from the ground up. Like, nobody had ever done it that way before. Like, vice presidents don't do that, but Dick did. And Dick was more than capable too, because he had been in Washington for quite some time. He had been a career man. He served as the White House Chief of Staff under Gerald Ford, and he also worked with Donald Rumsfeld, who was the Secretary of Defense. Then, Cheney himself served as the Secretary of Defense under George Bush Sr., who was himself the former CIA director. As such, Cheney was indispensable in the operations of the first Gulf War in that he helped gather a coalition of 30 nations to participate and worked with General Colin Powell on military strategy and logistics to ensure victory. Long story short, Dick has been deep into the U.S. military establishment for a long time. He's basically Darth Vader. His incredible amount of experience, of course, qualified him for a number of duties not usually expected of vice presidents, and George Bush was more than willing to accommodate. One particular example would be, in May of 2001, Dick Cheney was put in charge of military training operations, of which, for September 11th, there were at least 4 scheduled. These are often mentioned in regards to the confusion and slow response the military had intercepting the hijacked flights that Tuesday morning. These military operations are as follows. First is Global Guardian, and this was an annual command-level exercise organized by the United States Strategic Command in cooperation with the Space Command in NORAD, and its primary purpose was to test and validate nuclear command and control and execution procedures. Interestingly, this exercise was shifted to occur in October of previous years, but in 2001, it coincided with actual attacks. So they were like simulating nukes going off, like trying to intercept nukes. Then there was, secondly, Vigilant Guardian, and this was a semi-annual NORAD exercise that was running in conjunction with Global Guardian. And it involved scenarios that on that day closely resembled the real-world events, including a simulation of a bomber attack from the former Soviet Union. So like airplanes coming into United States airspace that were unidentified or doing something weird and they didn't know who they were and trying to identify them. So they were already trying to figure out what the hell was going on. Then third, Operation Northern Vigilance. And this was not a training exercise in the traditional sense. Basically, they just deployed a lot of fighters over to monitor a Russian exercise in the Arctic, which meant all of our resources were over in Canada, basically. Like a good number of our fighters were just not available that day. Then there was also a National Reconnaissance Office drill. Now, although it's less about military combat and training and more about emergency preparedness, the NRO had scheduled a drill where an airplane crash into their building was simulated, and this was planned independently of the actual. So like they were planning to do a drill or an airplane crash into government buildings, and it's like, is this just a drill? Is this for real? What is going on? So this naturally made everything quite a bit more confusing, as the coordinated attacks of 9/11 closely resembled a number of active ongoing crisis simulations in the departments of military intelligence tasked with detecting such threats in the first place.
September 11th, 2001 also just so happened to be Ben Sliney's first day on the job as the new Federal Aviation Administrator, the FAA's National Operations Manager. It was his first day. He's the one who gave the order to ground all the planes once we knew it was an act of terrorism.
He's like the czar of the sky. He's like the king of the great blue beyond. Like it's his responsibility what happens in the sky. And it's his first day on the job. He's trying to figure out if it's training or a drill. And he's like, I don't know what to do. Like, this is the most severe thing that's ever happened. And it's my first day. Like, wow.
Yeah, it's pretty wacky.
And just to put the icing on the cake, just a day prior on September 10th, Donald Rumsfeld, the Secretary of Defense, announced that the Pentagon had accidentally maybe made a little goofer and misplaced $2.3 trillion.
According to some estimates, we cannot track $2.3 trillion in transactions.
Just like, oops, we don't know what we spent it on.
Wasn't it also the financial section of the Pentagon that the plane crashed into?
Yes, and Building 7 had quite a bit of that going on too. So, and I checked, it's not so much like they don't know, like, oops, we dropped $2.3 trillion in the sink and we can't find it now. It's like, no, we spent it on something, but like, we don't know what we spent it on.
We can't tell you.
We put it somewhere, but we're not sure where. It's gone, sorry. So now that you know probably who the devil is, but you'd still like to know how the devil pulled it off, along with all of the occult symbolism that he used to do it, along with some alternative theories about how the buildings actually collapsed, some very big instances of hyperstition, what Michael Aquino, the founder of the Temple of Set, had to say about what happened on 9/11, my favorite part, then please visit www.patreon.com/thewholerabbit, where your monthly donation of just $5 will not only get you this extended episode, but every single one of our extended episodes going back before 2019. I'll send you a 5x5 high quality vinyl sticker of our Big Bunny Baphomet cover art, and you'll get the secret keys to our Discord server where you can talk to us about what happened to you on the day of 9/11. What were you doing? Were you eating spaghetti in the morning? Did it have meatballs? Thank you, everybody. Eat carrots and shoot lasers.
Pew pew pew.
Pew pew.